Maid's daughter, denied first-class seat. 5 minutes later, the plane is grounded and the pilot fired. The first-class cabin of Flight 714 gleamed under the soft amber lights, its leather seats smelling faintly of new polish and money. Flight attendants moved briskly, checking champagne flutes and folding linen napkins. Outside, the sky over Dallas-Fort Worth was streaked with the orange glow of sunset as the plane prepared for departure to Washington, D.C. In Seat 1A sat a small girl who didn't belong. At least, that's what everyone thought. Emily Vance, 11 years old, clutched a worn brown teddy bear to her chest. Its fur was matted, one eye missing, and a patch across its belly read, "Major Ted." Her coat was too big, her shoes slightly scuffed, and yet she sat with perfect posture, her blue eyes calm, waiting. When the chief flight attendant, Brenda Miller, noticed her, she frowned. 19 years of airline service had sharpened Brenda's sense for trouble, and this child, in her view, was definitely trouble. "Sweetheart," she said tightly, "I think you're in the wrong seat. First class starts at ticket F. You probably need to head toward the back." Emily looked up, her voice small but sure. "No, ma'am. I'm supposed to sit here. My great-grandfather told me to wait in 1A. A soldier is coming to meet me." Brenda blinked, unimpressed. "I'm sure he did, dear, but this is a full flight, and we can't have—" Before she could finish, a man in a crisp pilot's uniform stepped through the cabin door. Captain David Evans, tall, handsome, and known for both his skill and arrogance, looked annoyed. "What's the hold-up?" "This child refuses to move," Brenda said. "She says she belongs in first class." Evans glanced down at Emily, his patience already gone. "Young lady, you're delaying a flight to the nation's capital. Do you realize that?" Emily's fingers tightened on Major Ted. "I was told to wait here. Please, sir. My great-grandfather—" Evans cut her off, his tone sharp. "Enough. We don't have time for games. Miss Miller, have security escort her off the aircraft." Gasps rippled through the cabin. In row 2, an older gentleman in a navy blazer rose. "Excuse me, Captain," he said firmly. "That little girl isn't playing games. I know that name. Vance. You might want to check before you throw her out." Evans shot him a glare. "And who are you to question my command, sir?" The man met his stare. "Robert Peterson, U.S. Department of Defense." For the first time, the captain hesitated, but only for a second. "I'll handle it," he said curtly, unaware that his next 5 minutes would end his career forever. Brenda shifted uncomfortably as Captain Evans crouched in front of Emily, his forced smile tight and cold. "Listen carefully," he said in a low tone that only she could hear. "There are rules on this plane. First class isn't a playground for lost kids. Either you move to your assigned seat or you don't fly today. Understand?" Emily's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "My ticket says 1A," she whispered, holding out the paper. Her small hands trembled slightly, but she kept her chin up. Evans didn't even glance at it. "Security," he called over his shoulder. "Get her off." The first-class passengers murmured in disbelief. Robert Peterson rose again. "Captain, with all due respect, maybe check the manifest before humiliating a child. I've met General Vance. If this is his granddaughter, you're making a serious mistake." But Evans ignored him. Brenda tried to step in, her voice shaking. "Sir, perhaps we can verify—" "I set off the plane, Brenda." The pilot's voice cracked like a whip. "You follow my orders, not some passenger's stories." Tears finally spilled down Emily's cheeks as two security officers approached. She hugged Major Ted tighter, whispering under her breath, "He told me to wait in 1A. He promised." Before the officers could touch her, a sound erupted from the cockpit radio, sharp, urgent, and unmistakably military. "Flight 714, stand by. This is NORAD Operations Command. You are to hold position immediately." The entire cabin went silent. Evans froze. He walked quickly to the cockpit, answering with forced composure. "This is Captain Evans. We're on the ground, preparing for taxi. What's the issue?" The voice on the other end was clipped and authoritative. "The issue, Captain, is that you have detained a minor under federal protection. Passenger name, Emily Grace Vance. Authorization code Sigma 7. You will remain grounded until further instruction." Brenda's jaw dropped. The color drained from Evans's face. "Say again. Did you say Vance?" "Yes," the voice replied. "She is the granddaughter of General Michael Vance, recipient of the Medal of Honor. She is traveling under a presidential order. Any mistreatment of that passenger will be reported directly to the Pentagon." Every passenger in the cabin turned toward Emily, who sat trembling, wide-eyed. Brenda fell to her knees beside her seat. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry." Up front, Evans gripped the edge of the console, sweat breaking on his temples as the voice continued cold and final. "Captain Evans, you are hereby relieved of command pending investigation. Flight 714 is officially grounded." The pilot didn't move. He just stared straight ahead, the weight of his arrogance sinking in. Emily stroked her teddy bear's head softly and whispered, "My great-grandpa said soldiers never leave their own behind." The airport terminal buzzed with chaos as word spread that Flight 714 had been grounded by a direct order from the Pentagon. On board, the passengers sat in stunned silence, their impatience replaced by a creeping sense of awe. A little girl with a teddy bear had just halted an entire aircraft and cost a pilot his command. Captain Evans stood pale and motionless near the cockpit door as two uniformed officers boarded the plane. One of them, a tall, broad man with the insignia of the U.S. Air Force on his shoulder, spoke sharply. "Captain Evans, step aside. You're relieved of duty effective immediately." Evans swallowed hard. "Sir, I wasn't aware." The officer cut him off. "That's the problem. You didn't ask. You assumed. You humiliated a minor under national security transport. Do you have any idea who you just threatened to throw off your plane?" Every eye in the cabin turned toward Emily, who sat quietly in her seat, hugging Major Ted as though he were the only steady thing in the world. Brenda Miller stood beside her, trembling. The second officer, a woman with kind eyes and a steely presence, knelt down beside Emily. "Miss Vance, my name is Colonel Harris. We're very sorry for what happened. Your great-grandfather, General Michael Vance, is waiting for you at Walter Reed. We'll make sure you get there safely." Emily blinked back tears. "He's okay?" The colonel smiled gently. "He's hanging on, sweetheart. He said he wouldn't leave until he saw you." For the first time, Emily smiled, a small, brave smile that made even the most hardened soldier in the room clear his throat. Meanwhile, Captain Evans was escorted off the aircraft. Reporters, alerted by the commotion, were already gathering at the terminal window. Phones recorded as security officers led him away in silence. Within hours, the footage, Evans scolding a child and being pulled from his cockpit, would flood the internet. Brenda knelt beside Emily, tears filling her eyes. "I was awful to you," she whispered. "I thought you didn't belong here. I was wrong." Emily reached out and touched her hand gently. "My great-grandpa says mistakes don't make you bad. What you do next does." Brenda covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "You're wiser than most adults I know." As the officers prepared to transfer Emily to a private government jet, Robert Peterson from Seat 2C approached. "Miss Vance," he said warmly, "I think your great-grandfather would be proud of you already." Emily gave a shy nod. "He told me to be brave." Peterson smiled. "Then you did exactly what a Vance would do." Outside, as the sun dipped below the runway, the grounded plane shimmered in golden light, an unlikely monument to humility, courage, and a child's quiet dignity. The private government jet that replaced Flight 714 was silent except for the low hum of its engines. The seats were wide and polished, but Emily barely noticed. She sat by the window, staring at the clouds glowing pink and gold beneath the evening sun. Major Ted rested in her lap, his single button eye catching the light like a tiny medal. Across from her sat Colonel Harris, who'd refused to leave her side. Brenda Miller had asked to stay on the flight as well, despite being given permission to go home. When Emily learned that, she'd smiled softly. "She should come," she'd said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Now Brenda sat quietly a few rows back, folding napkins and pretending not to cry every time she glanced at the little girl she'd once judged. "Do you like flying?" Harris asked. Emily shrugged. "I think I like landing better. My great-grandpa says the sky is only beautiful if you have somewhere safe to come back to." The colonel smiled. "He's a wise man." A soft chime interrupted them. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the co-pilot, "we're approaching restricted airspace over Washington, D.C. On behalf of the United States Armed Forces, it's an honor to have Miss Emily Vance aboard." The colonel looked at her, eyes warm. "You just got an official salute from the whole East Coast, sweetheart." Emily blushed. "For giving someone a seat?" "For reminding grown-ups what respect looks like," Harris said. When they landed at Andrews Air Force Base, a motorcade was waiting. Military police saluted sharply as the plane's stairs lowered, flashing blue lights reflected off the tarmac. At the front of the formation stood Colonel Thomas Hayes, a broad-shouldered officer with silver hair and kind eyes. He knelt down as Emily stepped off the plane. "Welcome to Washington, Miss Vance," he said softly. "Your great-grandfather has been asking for you every hour." "Can I see him now?" she asked. Hayes nodded. "We'll take you straight to Walter Reed. But first—" He opened a small case. Inside was a folded flag neatly pressed. "General Vance asked us to give this to you when you arrived. He said it once flew above his command ship, and that it belongs with the bravest member of the family now." Emily pressed the flag against her chest, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't do anything brave." Hayes smiled gently. "Maybe not in your eyes, but sometimes courage doesn't look like a battle. It looks like kindness when the world forgets how to show it." As the convoy rolled toward the city, the monuments of Washington glowed in the night ahead, towering and eternal. Emily leaned her head against the window, the folded flag in her arms, and whispered to Major Ted, "We're almost home." The drive through Washington, D.C. was solemn and beautiful. The motorcade moved slowly past the Lincoln Memorial, its marble glowing like a ghost in the night. Inside the lead vehicle, Emily sat beside Colonel Hayes, clutching the folded flag in her lap. Helen, her mother, had been flown in earlier that afternoon and now sat silently beside her daughter, tears glistening in her tired eyes. When the convoy reached Walter Reed Medical Center, the gates opened instantly. Soldiers in crisp uniforms saluted as the cars rolled in. Inside, the halls were hushed, the air thick with antiseptic and reverence. Nurses and orderlies paused mid-step, recognizing the name on the admittance chart. Vance, Michael A., General, Retail. Colonel Hayes stopped outside a private room. "He's been awake since dawn," he whispered. "He said he could feel you coming." Emily hesitated, her small hand hovering near the door handle. "I don't want to make him tired." Hayes knelt to meet her gaze. "You won't. You'll give him strength." Inside, the room glowed softly under the lamplight. Machines hummed in rhythm with a slow but steady heartbeat. The man lying in the bed looked impossibly old, and yet, somehow, still powerful. His hair was white as snow, his skin paper-thin, but his eyes, sharp blue and full of life, lit up the moment he saw her. "There she is," General Michael Vance whispered, voice rough but warm. "The soldier I've been waiting for." Emily ran to his bedside, careful not to disturb the wires. "You didn't give up," she breathed. He smiled faintly. "You told me not to." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint beeping of the monitor. Emily climbed into the chair beside him, resting her head on his arm. The general stroked her hair with trembling fingers. "You did something extraordinary, Emily. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to shrink away. That's courage, the kind this country was built on." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "But I was scared." "So was I," he said softly. "Every soldier is. The trick is doing what's right anyway." Helen stepped closer, tears streaming freely. "She has your stubbornness," she said with a weak laugh. "That means she'll change the world," the old man murmured. Then he reached over to the bedside table, retrieving a small wooden box. Inside was a silver compass, its glass scratched, its needle still steady. "This guided me through every battlefield I ever saw," he said. "Now it's yours, so you'll always know where home is." Emily took it with shaking hands. "Will you still be here when I come back to visit?" He smiled, eyes glistening. "No matter where I go, you'll find me. Just follow the compass." She leaned over and kissed his forehead. "I love you, Grandpa." "And I love you, little soldier." Outside the hospital window, the flag above Walter Reed fluttered in the cold wind, strong, steady, unyielding. 2 weeks passed, and the cold Washington winter softened into the quiet chill of early spring. Walter Reed's courtyard began to bloom with patches of pale green, and each morning Emily sat by the hospital window, reading aloud to her great-grandfather. Sometimes she chose adventure stories, sometimes letters from soldiers General Vance had mentored long ago. He would smile, eyes closed, listening. "You know," he said one afternoon, voice weak but clear, "a soldier fights for his country only once, but he fights for kindness every day he lives." Emily looked up from the book. "Is that why you always helped people, even when you were tired?" He chuckled softly. "I wasn't helping them, sweetheart. They were helping me remember who I was." Helen stood by the door, watching quietly. Every moment between them felt borrowed, precious. When the doctors entered later that day and whispered about making arrangements, she excused herself and walked down the hallway, unable to stop the tears that had been building for weeks. That night, General Vance's condition worsened. Nurses hurried in and out. adjusting machines that could no longer hold the line against time. Emily refused to leave his side. She held his hand tightly, whispering stories the way he used to tell her, about lighthouses, the sea, and soldiers who always found their way home. "Emily," he rasped, "do you remember what I told you about courage?" She nodded through tears. "It's doing what's right even when you're scared." He smiled faintly. "That's my girl." The monitor's rhythm slowed. The nurses quietly withdrew, leaving only the soft hum of the machines and the sound of Emily's breathing. She reached up, placing the silver compass in his hand. "Now you'll never get lost," she whispered. He looked at her one last time. "I never was," he said, "because I had you." His fingers relaxed, the compass resting between them. The monitor went still. Emily didn't cry. Not yet. She simply sat there, her small hands folded around his, as if holding on could keep him near a moment longer. Outside, the first rays of morning light brushed against the flagpole, and the banner above the hospital stirred. When Helen entered minutes later, she found her daughter silent but steady, eyes full of something too deep for her years. "He's home now," Emily said softly. Helen knelt beside her, holding her close. "Yes, sweetheart, and so are we." The funeral was held 3 days later at Arlington National Cemetery. The morning air was sharp and still, the sky washed pale blue. Rows of white headstones stretched endlessly, gleaming in the sunlight like quiet sentinels. Soldiers in full-dress uniforms lined the path, their boots clicking in perfect rhythm as they saluted the passing casket draped in the American flag. Emily walked between them, her hand tucked in Helen's, the small silver compass glinting at her neck. She held her teddy bear, Major Ted, under her other arm, the one who'd been there through every moment of fear and courage. At the front row, President Harris himself stood waiting beside General Marco Malley, the NORAD commander who had once made the call that grounded a plane for one little girl. The president leaned down as Emily approached. "You must be Emily," he said kindly. "Your great-grandfather spoke of you in his final message to the White House. He said, 'My last mission is in good hands.'" Emily looked up, her eyes clear, despite the tears threatening to fall. "He told me soldiers never leave their own behind." The president nodded solemnly. "And now we make sure the world remembers that." As the ceremony began, the Marine band played softly. The folded flag from Walter Reed was presented to Helen, her hands trembling as she accepted it. Then, to everyone's surprise, Colonel Hayes stepped forward and saluted Emily directly. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice steady but emotional, "by special order of the Joint Chiefs, you are hereby awarded an honorary commendation for courage and conduct reflecting the highest traditions of the United States Armed Forces." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Hayes knelt, placing a small metal case in her hands. Inside was a bronze star, engraved simply, "For courage beyond rank." Emily blinked through tears. "But I'm not a soldier." Hayes smiled softly. "That's what makes it even greater." As the rifles fired the final salute, Emily stood tall beside her mother. The sound echoed through the cemetery, 3 sharp cracks that rolled through the air like thunder. She didn't flinch. She held her compass tightly and whispered, "You made it home, Grandpa." After the crowd dispersed, Emily remained by the grave. Brenda Miller, the flight attendant who had once tried to send her away, approached quietly, carrying a single white lily. "I never said thank you," she murmured, "for teaching me something that day. I'll never forget it." Emily smiled faintly. "Neither will I." When they left, the wind picked up, rustling through the flags and the trees that stood like silent guardians over the resting soldiers. Somewhere beyond the clouds, it felt as if a ship had finally docked, its captain at peace. Months later, the world had moved on, but Emily hadn't forgotten. Every morning before school, she stood on the small apartment balcony that overlooked the Potomac River, holding the silver compass her great-grandfather had given her. The needle always pointed true, but she had learned that home was never a place on a map. It was something you built with kindness, one choice at a time. Helen was working again, this time as a nurse at the Veterans Hospital. She had found peace among the soldiers who remembered General Vance and treated her like family. Sometimes they would tell Emily stories about him, how he refused to leave a wounded man behind, how he always carried chocolate for scared recruits. Each story felt like a letter from the past, a reminder that goodness could echo through generations. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Emily saw a man in uniform struggling to load groceries into his car. Without thinking, she ran forward and helped him lift the heavy bags. He thanked her, smiling awkwardly. "You didn't have to do that, kiddo." She shrugged. "That's what soldiers do. They help." He blinked in surprise. "You're a soldier?" "Not really," she said, touching the compass around her neck. "But someone brave once told me I could be one if I keep doing the right thing." That evening, Emily placed Major Ted, the teddy bear who had seen everything, on the windowsill beside the compass and the folded flag. The city lights shimmered on the river like 1,000 quiet promises. Helen joined her, setting 2 mugs of hot cocoa on the table. "Do you miss him?" Helen asked softly. "Every day," Emily said. "But when I do something good, it feels like he's still here." Helen wrapped an arm around her daughter. "Then I think he's closer than you know." Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of traffic and the low whistle of the night breeze through the trees. Emily imagined it was her great-grandfather's voice, steady and kind, whispering through the world he'd once fought for. "Keep the line steady, soldier. Keep your compass true." She smiled, eyes glimmering under the starlight. For the first time since that fateful flight, she felt completely at peace. No fear, no doubt, just the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And somewhere far above, where clouds brushed against the stars, a proud old general smiled down on her, his last and smallest soldier, knowing his mission was finally complete.